Today we're going to talk about conditionals in Latin grammar. And conditionals are sentences that show cause and effect, whether that cause is actual or hypothetical, could be either way. But let's look at one in English first. If Caesar were alive today, he would defeat all the enemies of Rome. So conditionals are always going to start with if or unless in Latin. There are some irregular ones, but the major ones are going to start like that. So the first half of this, the if clause, in Latin is called the protasis. For us, it's going to start with si or nisi, and it's going to be the dependent clause out of the sentence. And it expresses the condition that has to be fulfilled for the next thing to happen. And the next thing, here in red, is the apodosis, and this is the independent clause of the sentence, and it's the result, whether real or imaginary, of the protasis. So we have two types of conditional clauses, those that use indicative verbs and those that use subjunctive verbs, and there are three of each. Indicative conditionals show factual occurrences. The cause happens and then the effect definitely happens. And you're going to use indicative verbs of the same general tense throughout. So there are three types. There's the future more vivid, which uses future or future perfect indicative verbs on both sides, the protasis and the apodosis. And here we have an example. If you believe this, you will be very wrong. So note that this is a logical conclusion. If it happens, you will be wrong. There's no doubt here. The simple present uses present indicative verbs on both sides. And again, there's no doubt. If you believe this, you are very wrong. And finally, the simple past uses the imperfect, perfect, or pluperfect indicative on either side and shows, again, a logical conclusion. If you believed this, you were wrong. With all of these, there's no doubt involved. The first thing happens, and then the next thing happens. Whereas the subjunctive shows contrary to fact reasoning. So you probably should have done something, but you didn't, so something else happened. So we have the future less vivid. And remember, there aren't future subjunctives, so everything's kind of going to get bumped up once. So instead, we're going to use the present subjunctive here. And it's going to be translated as, if you should believe this, you would be very wrong. The present contrary to fact, again, things are bumped up, so we're going to use the imperfect subjunctive here. If you were believing this, you would be very wrong. And finally, the past contrary to fact uses the perfect, but mostly the pluperfect subjunctive. And it is, if you had believed this, you would have been very wrong. Note that in all three of these, there is doubt that the second part happens. Look at the past contrary to fact. If you had believed this, you would have been wrong. But the assumption is that you didn't believe it, so you aren't wrong. These are the main 6 types of conditionals, the 3 indicative and the 3 subjunctive in Latin. So try to memorize their names. Recognizing them shouldn't be too difficult. The nuances of how to translate them might be a little tricky, so go back, check out those slides, and remember the wording for each. Remember, the indicative is a direct cause and effect, where the subjunctive is contrary to fact.